so graciously. So yeah, please grab a piece of pizza if you haven't. So tonight, our main focus is going to be speaking about what happened in Raleigh the last couple weeks. We have Brooke Bulman from Carolina Hemp Company, and we'll get him mic'd up here in a second. We have Blake Butler with the Executive Director of the North Carolina Industrial Hemp Association. I'm Taylor with Simply Extract, and we're going to hear from you guys questions and answers and let you guys know what's going on and what we can do. And we also have Franny from Franny's Pharmacy, and she's been doing big things. She's going to be joining us on the panel as well, so we'll get mic'd up. But we appreciate you guys for coming out here and supporting North Carolina Hemp.
All right, thanks everybody. My name is Blake Butler from the North Carolina Industrial Hemp Association, and I'm so happy to be here tonight back in my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. I spend a lot of time in Raleigh, and it's really hot there for more reasons than I care to count. But at the same time, we're learning a lot as we finally communicate with our legislature and our lawmakers. As everybody needs to remember, we started this pilot program under some state statutes, and besides our legislature going ahead and approving it 4 years ago, they hadn't had a lot of interaction with our program, so we still are going through that education process. So let me give you a play-by-play of what's happened with Smokeable Flower, because it's been an interesting journey. A few months ago, I was down in Maiden, North Carolina, talking with Carolina Mills Company about starting a brand new hemp textile line. And I got a text message from someone that said, "Have you seen the SBI memo?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And they said they're calling for a ban on smokable hemp. And folks, you got to understand, the SBI here in North Carolina, they serve a variety of roles. We see them when folks get kidnapped and some other larger issues that captivate the media. But as I've learned, the SBI is also kind of that conduit for every single law enforcement branch under them. The Sheriff's Association, the Chief of Police Association, the DA's Association. So as soon as we learned that our legislators were actually entertaining a ban on smokable flower, I got in the car and went down to Raleigh and was told that a ban was going to happen. One way or another, they were convinced that we had created a major problem in our state with smokable flower. Most of the reasoning was this: you sold us on an industrial hemp program, and you guys are growing for pro facto legalization of marijuana. That pretty much sums it up in a way that I've heard it 100 different ways. But as many of you know that have been down to Raleigh, that's more or less the thinking when it comes to smokable hemp. So knowing that a ban was going to take place, I immediately went down to Raleigh and worked as many connections as I had and got a meeting with the SBI and asked them what would it take to figure this out for our state. I know Kentucky threw their hands up and says, "We don't want to figure out smokable hemp. It looks the same, it smells the same," but the fact is, it's not the same. So I asked the SBI, what would it take? And they said, "Well, we'll give you more time." So I went back to Senator Jackson and asked for more time and reminded him that all the investments for 2019 had already been made in the smokable hemp market, as greenhouses have been erected and all sorts of folks have been approved. And as we sat there last Friday, by the way, another 100 were approved, 85 of them to grow for CBD and smokable hemp. But as we discussed it back and forth, I realized that Senator Jackson on the Senate side understood the farmer. And he was able to craft a new amendment that backed it up to December 2020 and put a very important element in there that we got to sit with regulators and others to figure out best practices. And best practices is what we all want and what we've been talking about on Facebook and social media for years. There is no way you can say we're going to be the leader in this industry unless you proactively are going to develop best practices yourself, because we're not getting any guidance from the USDA or the FDA last time I checked. We're going to have to do it here and develop those with law enforcement and regulators and others, and this gives us that opportunity. And so we have that in place, and we passed it through every single committee, and it passed the state Senate. And we were happy that that ban on smokeable flower was going to be delayed, and we had the opportunity, all of us, as we form committees, to figure out best practices for our state. But then it crossed over to the House side. And last Monday night, I was invited to a meeting with the SBI, the Sheriff's Association, leaders of the North Carolina Senate and House, and we started discussing what it would take to pass it through the House with this delayed ban, and it didn't look good. Even when we offered the compromise of an open container law. And I can tell you our association has warmed up to this open container law compromise. And let me tell you why. Because law enforcement's biggest problem is probable cause on roadside stops. And this can help take care of that issue immediately while we figure out how to take care of the other areas of concern. I don't necessarily like it, but I can tell you as I stand before you today, if we had recreational marijuana legal in this state, we would have a parallel open container law. You couldn't smoke it in your car, and you couldn't smoke it on the streets. So if that's what we have to do to help law enforcement figure this out, then we're willing to do it, because I am not going to hurt the North Carolina farmer. But as we found out last week, thank you. As we found out last week, this is a big chess game. Taylor, Brian, Mike Sims, others that are here can tell you that once it crossed over to the House side, Representative Jimmy Dixon, the chairman of the House Ag Committee, is not too up on what we're trying to do. Now, granted, I had a great meeting with him. He told me his side of it, and he's getting a lot of pressure from law enforcement, and we respect that. But what was supposed to take place Tuesday morning was canceled on Monday afternoon, and then what took place on Monday as far as a House Ag Committee meeting was everyone that was there was denied public comment because they didn't have the support to pass this with a new date of 2019. So it was rescheduled for Friday morning when a lot of the members that we had personally talked to were not there anymore. A game of chess, folks. This is the process. It's a fluid process. I don't like it, but as we've joked on Facebook, a bill on Capitol Hill, that's really the deal. Hold on, bro. So going forward, right here, I have this, and we have 20 or 25 of these, and I want you to take pictures on your phone. But going forward, next week, it will go in front of the House Finance Committee. On Tuesday, it will pass very quick because there's no public comment there. There's no financial component of that legislation there, and it will move to the House Judiciary Committee. This is the folks we need to communicate with, and these are the people on this list. You'll see them all over Facebook that we need to send email to these House members and say, moving this ban up would devastate the North Carolina hemp farmer, the hemp industry, but more importantly, and this is real important, and if you email these folks, I want you to say this. We will be sending a message out to the rest of the nation. Don't do business with North Carolina, because they can just do an about face just like that. So if we cannot get it done in House Judiciary, it will go on to rules. And then it will go back to, or excuse me, it will go to the House floor for a vote. If it passes the House, it will go back to the Senate to concur. As I mentioned before, Senator Brent Jackson does want that ban delayed and mentioned at the committee meeting. He will not concur with anything in 2019. So I do take him at his word. And for what it's worth, folks, I would rather be spending time on hemp bioplastics and fiber solutions and expanding the membership, but this is threatening to all of us, because if we give in at any level, at any point, then we're going to be vulnerable. And this is something that I want everyone to think about. We have approved farmers, including many in this room, for 3 years to grow for this purpose. This will not be banned in our state. That is wrong. It's unfair, and what we need to do is build up trust with the farmer once again. Build that trust, and this new seed allows us to do that. So going forward, I would love for each of you to take one of these or take a picture of it on your phone and start emailing the House Judiciary Committee members. I can tell you one thing that is real important to me and everyone that's traveled to Raleigh. We have got to remain professional. We have got to stay on point. While I love all of you on the Free the Plant side, please understand that it hurts us sometimes because it's at the wrong time, where we're trying to make some strides in hemp legislation, but more importantly, from my viewpoint, I'm trying to protect all of you guys. I really am. And if everyone remains professional, it helps. It truly does. And I just want to thank Talon and Brian for coming down there multiple times last week, and they got to see how frustrating this process can be. But going forward, I'm optimistic. I really am. And I think we're getting more visibility for our state right now, for the right and the wrong reasons. But at the same time, we got some great minds in this room. So together, we're going to make it happen. I need that outreach to occur as much as possible with these House Judiciary members to tell your story of why Smokeable Flower is important to you. And I'm going to take one question from Brooke, and then I'm going to introduce the other speakers, and then we'll take some more questions later on the panel. Yes? I do understand where they're coming from, but with not only the open container provision, but with compliant packaging, with seed to sale traceability, which many of you already have in place, and just a new code of ethics, we can immediately cure most of what ails them. And I believe that some of this can be, our opportunity, like I said. Instead of, when we're at this crossroads, instead of throwing our hands up, our state can be a little bit different. I don't know if you saw, but there's companies that are suing the state of Indiana right now because they have outlawed smokable flower. I got a call from Kentucky State University. They're talking about bringing smokable flower back. So as we made the point to our legislators, all these states around us are allowing smokable flower because they realize it's a new revenue opportunity to compete with the West Coast states. Because any of you that have retailers know that most of the smokable flower as it transitions in, as we started this program, was coming from Oregon, Colorado, and our growers are just starting to bring, or start to be part of that supply chain, which is important, our growers here. But I can tell you this much, law enforcement just doesn't want to work with us at this point. And that's frustrating, but at the same time, I do believe that we can bring it back to that 2020 delayed date, and that quarterly meeting and that monthly initiative, they'll have to report back to the legislator. And if we get that, then we're heading in the right direction.
So that list is the key to that?
This list is the key to this, and if it goes beyond this, then we'll do the same thing with the House Rules Committee the next week.
When you talk to politicians and law enforcement, what is your elevator speech?
Well, I'm not going to give that to you right now, sir. I appreciate you asking that question. We'll talk about that later. All right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce.
How are you approaching them? Are you approaching
I'm going to introduce the rest of this. We'll talk about it later after the panel. Thank you for the question. I'm going to introduce the rest of the speakers, and as all you guys know, I'll stick around. You can ask me anything. I mean, this is my life at this point, and I feel like I've inherited all 1,300 growers, all 5 million square feet of greenhouse space. People are panicking, and that's okay, because this is important that we figure this out. This is asking for so long. Take us professionally, let us set the bar, and there is no way we can call ourselves gold standard unless we do it at some point. So, without further ado, as many of you know, I mean, I wouldn't even be here, and I've told this story a lot of times, but if it weren't, I mean, there's some new folks in the room, but I wouldn't even be here if this next speaker hadn't given me a call and said, my energy drink is getting taken off the shelves because it has a 5-fingered leaf on the side. And that energy drink, Can of Energy, ended up connecting us and kind of leading me and my business partner, Jill Lieberman, and the co-founder of HempX into this journey of figuring out the difference between hemp and CBD and Mary Jane. So without further ado, it's Brooke Bulman from Carolina Hemp Company.
Stop, and I want to give a big thank you to Cam for hosting us month after month. Please treat that woman right. Blake, I've apologized to Blake and Jill over and over for dragging them into this mess, but I'm going to tell you, you know, there's multiple fronts that we're all having to work on. We have the industry people, we got Brooke, farming, we got Franny, farming, we got retailers, we've got processors that are all involved in making all this hemp world go around. And what's going on down in Raleigh right now is disturbing, to say the least. Tonight, we brought production capabilities in here so we could craft a unique message, right, out particularly Western North Carolina. And before I go any further, I want to also, raise your hand, Mike. Mike Sims from Charlotte CBD. I don't know if you guys know who they are or what he does, but pay attention because they're down there rocking the boat. And they are dead set on making this happen. Just like everybody else in here. Brooke, you, Talon, Franny, we're all so affected by what decisions are made in Raleigh. When we went down last week, I'll get this out here real quick. I'm not a big supporter of what happens down in Raleigh. I just don't like playing the game, have no interest in it. I'd much rather stay here with my people and do our thing and do it well. So knowing that, I still went down there with the concept that maybe these folks are going to take a moment and listen to our concerns. We have 2 minutes each, right, to listen to our concerns and have a little bit of empathy towards, you know, the effects of their decisions. I'm not so convinced that that's what is the priority in Raleigh, okay? Blake, in his infinite wisdom and his very unique style of approaching things, is the right guy for this industry to be in Raleigh, okay? There's no doubt. And before we go too much into this, I'm gonna thank you, and I want everybody to, let's thank him. God, it's a lot of driving, guys. We love you. Blake has had the arduous task of talking me down from the edge of the cliff. He's talked Franny down. He has talked everybody down from, he's talked Brooke down from just taking our heart and putting it on our sleeve and causing all of us, you know, possibly more trouble than is necessary. That being said, and that's what he's doing now, is helping us understand the process, right? And it is a process, whether we like it or not. Tonight, we want to craft a unified message. That is incredibly difficult to do because it's raw. It's Brooke's family, but it's also ours. It's Blake's. It's all of us that have everything invested in this community have everything to lose also. So it is really raw. My personal, I'm going to tell you, and I know it's being recorded and this will probably end up on the video and I'm okay with that. My first thing that Blake taught me down from was flat out overt non-compliance. Hey, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to be the first person in this state to go in front of a local ABSC affiliate and say, I'm flat out not going to comply with ridiculous dictates. Blake, again, in his infinite wisdom, helped me realize the folly at this particular juncture in that line of thought. There's a time and place for everything, and if we overstep our, if we misjudge where we're at in the process, we can only cause more problems. Not saying that there's not a time and place for the pitchforks, which we've had a lot of fun talking about that because you talk about a hell of a statement. 1,000 people showing up in Raleigh with pitchforks. I can assure you that would be a statement. Now, let's do it. Let's do it. Is that, let me get a raise of hands. Pitchforks. All right, I guess it's settled. But I'm gonna, beating around the bush, all this to say, what we witnessed in Raleigh last week, it's more than chess. It is chess, right? But they own all the pieces. They have the white pieces and the black pieces. They have the board. They own the cabinet that the board is stored in when nobody's playing. It is their game that they're playing, and there's no way around that. So much as it goes against the grain with me personally, and I know a lot of folks in this room, right now, emails, showing up there in person, outnumbering uniforms 10-1, 3-1, outnumbering them and having a louder voice than them is going to be incredibly compelling to these people. Along the way, what do we do? What do we do if it doesn't, get stumped in the committee? What do we do if the governor passes it? How do we approach it? What is our unified message? Ultimately, about the clearest message I think we could send when you look at this from a 30,000-foot view is that we kill this bill now. We don't even want hemp provisions in the Farm Act now. It's not the right time. The FDA is coming out in August with a list of guidelines. Why would we preemptively introduce legislation before Raleigh has any inclination of what the FDA is about to say? It doesn't make sense, right? Let's get the provisions out of the bill, and let's revisit it next year when we all have more information and a sounder footing to stand on as a hemp community. This is important. Killing the bill, right? Killing the provisions in the bill, because the Farm Act has multiple layers and they're not all involved with hemp, right? But we certainly are not happy with more than the smokable ban, and there's other people here tonight going to talk about that. The $250,000 blanket bond provision will run a lot of people out of business. Who can afford $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 worth of bond money to stay in business, to do small craft batches, and to service a part of this industry that is already thriving? You know what I mean? So there is so much more work that needs to be done to this bill than just a ban on smokeable flower, that it's just not the right time to do it. That's where we think we're going to have the most effect. That's where we at Carolina Hemp Company, taking the advice of Blake and understanding that, man, we just can't, we got to play the game. We got to work with these people to the best of our abilities, right? But at the same time, right now, it just doesn't make sense to go this route. And I'm gonna hurry up and wrap this up, because I got 3 other people in here that we want to actually get on this microphone. In Buncombe County, there's no interest in enforcing a ban on smokable hemp by the Sheriff's Department. There's no interest by the APD or the City Council. This is not a thing to them. It's not been a problem. In Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, and there will be a little expansion on this, it's not a priority. Why are they going to throw extra shit in there to have to contend with? It's just not a priority. So we feel like, and I feel like, after seeing the display in Raleigh last week and hearing the passages quoted out of the Reefer Madness handbook by Dixon and some of the other LEOs that come up there, we feel like it's a slightly more shaky and disturbing playing field than just common sense and science and economics. Again, reinforcing professionalism, right? And putting our best foot forward without sticking our other foot square in our mouth. And that's hard to do when all of you feel exactly like I do, right? So I'm gonna leave it there, because there's some other really intense things that need to be said here by some other folks in this state. Mike drove all the way from Charlotte to be here tonight just so we could help craft a unified message, right? And that's what we're trying to do here. Talon, Simply Extract, Franny, with Franny's Farm. I want to mic you up next, if I may. Okay, you're already mic'd up? Good. And then let's just go ahead and proceed through this thing, okay? So again, thanks everybody so much for coming out here time and again and again. And I'll remind every one of you, we have spent more time celebrating in this building than we have having this kind of conversation. And we can't lose sight of that either. That means that we have won at every step along the way to get us to where we are now. So let's smoke that over.
Just this fall, over 2 months, with a lot of these people, I brought Brooke, an amazing grower, all these people, spoke to over 6,000 farmers in North Carolina, Tennessee, and South Carolina, and inspired and motivated them to grow hemp, because this is an agricultural opportunity we haven't seen in years, and farmers are struggling. So I feel a little bit motivated and passionate about speaking for the farmers. We already have contracts, for one thing. Nobody said, usually it's pretty easy for a farmer to sleep at night. We work hard. We have muscles for miles, determined, and when we crash, we go. Right now, it's a little bit hard to sleep at night, knowing that all the people in the community and what we serve is questioning us. When they said, great, go at it. We're growing. We have crops in the field. And that's why I want to especially thank Taylon and Brian and Blake for being there to represent. I'm up at the crack of dawn in the field. And so thank you for being the voice for our farmers, but we all need to be the voice for farmers. We have thousands of people counting on us to bring this crop that provides medicine, health, wellness, and sustains our farm. North Carolina is an agricultural economy. We're risking our farm, small scale farming, right now by saying you can smell smokable flower. It smells lovely. It's my favorite smell. And oh, it's my favorite smell. So we have contracts, and we would be the ones that take the risk because the buyers can back out of a contract. And in that hemp plant, the smokable flower is the most valuable part. That is what makes it viable. As I talk to farmers, I'm like, that flower is the money. That's where you focus. Talk to them about growing. We do this. We have inspired farmers. They have hope. We need to support North Carolina agriculture, our farmers, and forget it. We're working. Please stand up. Please stand up for us. This is so important. This is what we need. Thank you. And I'd like to share, Jeff is on the other side.
So first of all, thank you, Blake, Brian, Taylon, for you guys making the effort going out to Raleigh. I am helping out back here by sending emails to all the representatives and senators, and I'm typing custom emails, not just cutting and pasting, because I want to be able to articulate what it's like to be on the receiving end of people who are not in this industry and don't understand the fight that we're going through right now, the investments that we've made, the sacrifices we've made, the commitments that we've made. Blake makes a great point. Like, guess what? The farmers are already planted this year. You're gonna go and try to pull the rug out now? I mean, it's insanity. So I encourage each and every one of you to go out there, get on your computer, type up your custom email, send it to them, make it heartfelt, make it genuine, and make it count. Because if we don't do this, Blake said it himself, outnumbered 3-1. It's the only way it's gonna get done is if your voice is heard, and the only way your voice is gonna get heard is if you get involved, and if you get everybody you know to get involved, because everybody that's been up here talking has said it. Without flower, we don't have farming hemp in North Carolina. It's that simple. That's what it boils down to. So get involved, guys, because it's the only way it's going to happen. And Blake cannot do this by himself.
Got your back.
We all got to get our friends, our family, our co-workers, everybody involved, and we got to support that man right there who is giving it all he's got to protect every one of us in this room and everybody across the state. So get involved. That's my parting words.
Amen. We all in, right? So I get the honor of introducing the next person, which is Taylon, and who has been involved in so many ways before hemp even became legal. In so many ways, she's got a great voice, great activist. We appreciate everything you've done. So tell us what you got to say, sister.
I'm one of the biggest proponents for legal cannabis. I love cannabis, but this is not the time or place. And I didn't necessarily realize how much that was true until I went to Raleigh and I met these legislators, and we really need to vote these guys out, but right now they're in office. So we do have to do things a pretty particular way, and we have been very much so. So just to catch you guys up a little bit about the worst proponents of these bills are the smokable ban. And I think it's really important that we stop calling it smokable hemp. I think we just need to call it hemp flora, because the smokable part is what's scaring a lot of these legislators. But they're trying to ban it. In the Senate side, we were able to get it pushed to December 2020, which would at least give time for the farmers that are currently farming to harvest, make some money, and we figured that we could move this bill far enough out that we could fight it before we got there. By 2020, we're going to be way past that. We all understand that. But on the House side, they've pushed it back to December 2019. All these farmers that have planted all their plants will be harvesting the end of October. Protect our North Carolina farmers. You want an elevator speech. Protect North Carolina farmers, because this will wipe them out of business. Processors, a $250,000 processor bond will wipe out any entrepreneur or small business in North Carolina. If you're trying to get a bond in an industry this new, you have to have financials, you have to have capital. Small people like me will not survive. We have to push back on the processor's bond as well. So we're in the Judiciary Committee next. What can we do? I'm sure that's the question everyone's feeling right now. We're going to have a phone bank right here on Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. and we're going to call every legislator on the Judiciary Committee, as well as we're going to have a template email that we can email to them that you guys can craft how you like, but the general of what we're trying to push for in these amendments. I'm working with the City Council, as well as Blake and Brian. We have a resolution on the table in support for North Carolina hemp with smokable hemp flower. The police officers are not complaining about this here. It was the Sheriff's Association mainly that was pushing for this, and the majority of the people that were speaking are just afraid.
You guys laid the groundwork for people like us, Charlotte CBD. I think too often we feel like we're outnumbered, that we don't make a difference, especially in the kind of political climate we're in now. It seems like no matter how hard we try, no matter what effort we put forth, it seems not to work out for us. I think it's intimidating to get into that aspect, and to get into the political parts. It was for me, and I think it is for a lot of people in this room. Luckily, we have the guidance of Blake and some other people that understand how all the games and tricks work up there, and that's exactly what's happening. There's no mistake. It's not an accident that the meeting time and place gets changed 3 or 4 times. It's not an accident. They're playing games, and at times it's hard to be professional and proactive, and Blake's had to reel me in a few times. I am the nuclear option. I am all about the plant fully and entirely, and I have been my entire life, and been out in the open about it to a lot of extent. It's got me in trouble. But Blake's right, and everyone else that spoke is right. We're baby stepping. I too thought that we were a little more progressive than what we were once I arrived in Raleigh. We have some dinosaurs up there, as nice as I can be. Yeah. And they're really just, they're not educated. And honestly, I was a fly on the wall and standing next to Blake as he was talking to Jimmy Dixon. And we'll talk about the whole conversation, but I all of a sudden empathized and understand where that man was coming from. He and I live two different worlds, but I understand. He has his voters that voted him into office to have their best interest at heart. He thought he was getting one thing. To them, we're peddling something way worse than cannabis. They're not educated to what it is. They're fearful. It's taking over their neighborhoods. It's going to infect their kids. These are the kind of things we're dealing with. So we do kind of have to take an approach with gloves on, try to play their game as much as possible. If you're not the best writer, we'll have forum emails that we'll be having. If you're not the best speaker, we'll have something for you to read. Even if you want to write something down, make a short video clip, donate $5, $1. There's nothing too small to help this cause. You guys, Asheville, North Carolina, started this entire movement that has rippled across the country. And most of the time for Charlotte CBD, I was standing in front of a cell phone, not realizing what I was doing. But I've had calls from London, Australia, across the country and across the world because of social media, and all of this is because of people in this room. So we are making a difference. We are being heard. Most people, like most of us, have to work, so we can't go to 2 or 3 different meetings during the week, but you guys can support in so many other ways. We have many steps to get to where we need to get to. I too want the whole plant, but we'll take the baby steps to get there. There are some things in place. I have been in contact with many different attorneys and law enforcement and different things to find some different options, but I'm willing to take this as far as necessary. There's some laws I think were slightly violated, and they're showing last week. We're handling that. We also think that they're in direct violation of interstate commerce laws that are being established right now, where hemp cannot be stopped from traveling through your state. So ultimately, even if they ban it here, it can still be shipped in from any other state right through the Postal Service, and nothing they can do to stop it. So again, all we're doing is putting profits and money in other people in other states' pockets, and law enforcement is still faced with the same issues. There's definitely a middle ground. We have to work hard to get there. I think we're all agree that there is some regulation necessary, but not over-regulation, and something that benefits all of us in the industry. I am forming what's called the Hemp Retailers Association. I don't want to take away from any movement that Blake and the Industrial Hemp Organization or anybody has done, but we are forming a nonprofit for legal representation for the retailers, and also to, it's not going to be specifically to North Carolina, but it's also going to be up and down the entire country. We just want to put money forth and kind of get our message honed down to everybody being on the same page. I think we all want the same thing. We just got to make sure we're clear and concise. Everybody wants to add a part. Everybody wants to throw in money. Everybody kind of wants to start their own thing. But I think it's important at this time especially to band together as one, because that's what got us to this point, and we have to stick with what works, and that's what's worked that got us here. So we have to have one central message, one clear and concise. Let's get this first step. Let's get hemp flower back on the board, stick together, and then we'll meet here again to take it to the next step. But again, I want to thank everyone in here. I'm at anyone here's disposal. If you need me, if you need my help, if you need my guidance, if I don't have the answer, I'll find it for you. But I believe in the plant. We all know what it does. We all know what it helps. It is the answer to saving our earth, period. And it starts right here in this room. And every one of you have already moved mountains to get here. And we're just beginning, and I believe in every one of you. And thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
I did get a couple questions just a second ago. I want to tell you guys one thing. The path of SB 315, which is the North Carolina Farm Act, let's just say hypothetically it passes through House Judiciary and House Rules. It goes to the House floor. If it passes there, it goes back to the Senate. And since Senator Jackson was the author of the bill, they have to concur with any changes. If he concurs to those changes, then it goes to the governor's desk. And the governor could veto it because of the hog lagoon provisions. Something that's also buried in the North Carolina Farm Act that has nothing to do with hemp. So believe me, that is also a possibility. But I did want to mention that the death of the Farm Act could take multiple paths. We just don't know what that is at this point. You know, guys, honestly, I don't know that much about it. I don't. I mean, as Mike and others know, we've had speakers, you know, speak about it, but it seems that they're okay with some of the hog lagoon provisions. I just don't know enough to speak on it, you know, without enough research. So, but again, what you have to realize, what we have to realize is we would rather have hemp legislation that was standalone, that wasn't being voted up or down based on other things that were attached to it that didn't relate to the hemp industry. So ultimately, if this whole thing is thrown out, and then when they come back in session next year and we can form a, you know, some hemp legislation that gives us the tenets of what we submit to the USDA for our plan, then so be it. We get the chance for input, and we get the chance to do it right. So again, with that being said. Yes, Brooke.
So it seems like a real logical argument is not to engage in this smokeable flower talk, but to say, hey, this is way too complicated for the North Carolina farmer. You can't shut us down or open us up based on things that have nothing to do with this. And the FDA is about to speak on this coming up. So instead of us going headfirst to law enforcement, which is a bad idea, we should be talking to logical points of this doesn't make sense to make these decisions right now. We'll talk about it later, right?
Definitely, and I just to correct Brian, I mean, it's the USDA. It's not the FDA that's going to give us direction in August. It's the USDA. And just know, guys, if one state plan gets approved with smokable hemp, then we've got our argument that federally they have approved smokable hemp as an agricultural commodity, and it can no longer be thrown around by the states as something else. And that's the worst feeling, as these guys know, is all the law enforcement on Friday that stood up and said that smokable hemp was a gateway drug. That was an interesting experience in itself. And I can tell you right now, and this is the way I come at it, if you don't have the research to speak on what you're referring to, and considering that smokable hemp is not addictive and non-psychoactive, it is so far-fetched to think that someone could classify that as a gateway drug. And one thing I put on Facebook today that some of you might have seen is what Tennessee is doing. They're doing an excise tax of 6.6% on all smokable hemp products starting January the 1st. And when I put that on Facebook today, people went ballistic.
Is that on the farmer or the retailer?
It's just on,
it's on the consumer.
It's on the consumer.
Which is also.
But what people don't realize in this process, if you do something like that and then give some of that money back to law enforcement, they'll go away. Because what you can say effectively is part of that's going to go to a reliable field test. And part of that can go towards education. And part of that can go to make your department stronger. And that's how you get compromise today when there's a lack of education or understanding. And it does blow my mind that the cops in Tennessee are like, yeah, we'll take the tax. We're good. But somehow here in North Carolina, we have a smokable hemp problem. Again, and we have to work with what we have right now, like many people have mentioned with our legislator and the makeup. So it is what it is, and these guys are still in session. Yes. So what she's asking is how can we start that education process with the sheriff's associations and those individual sheriffs, and someone mentioned it earlier, but our sheriff here, Quentin Miller, and all his representatives, he's awesome. They don't have a problem with smokable hemp. It's not a problem here. So let's just go ahead and eliminate that one county, and we got 99 to deal with. And I mean that earnestly, in that we talked about it. It's just not an issue here. I will tell you guys this. A police officer from a large city told me this. I don't care if people smoke pot. I don't care if people smoke hemp. What I care about is the people that smoke pot that have illegal guns in their car. And this is our probable cause. So if you can help us with a reliable field test or some other sort of apparatus where we can maintain and preserve that probable cause. And that's why, knowing that the DEA wouldn't come down with an approved field test in the next 6 months, maybe another year, that's why we pivoted to the open container law. Because what the open container law does for law enforcement is it says to that consumer, this is like a prescription pill bottle. Don't open this in the car. Don't smoke this in your car, and don't smoke it on the streets. And as a compromise, it seems to make a lot of sense, doesn't it? It seems to make a lot of sense. So we're still going to work that angle, because after that comes compliant packaging with COAs and QR codes that can be zapped with apps, and we give law enforcement more tools. So with all of this, we're working to help law enforcement, not to defy them. And so that's in the next few weeks what we're going to develop and get our point across. But the education of county sheriffs is important, and this is why. Is because no one ever told them that we were growing for the smokable flower market. And we know this. No one ever sent them a memo and says, hey, by the way, some of these retailers, they're going to be selling this thing that smells and looks exactly like marijuana. No one told them. So they're playing catch up. And we have to be respectful in that regard. We really do. With a lot of county sheriffs in small towns, they're getting the calls that Brooke the grower's growing weed, and Brooke the grower's, bringing weed down to this retailer that's selling it in jars. Because that's what they see, that's what they know, and that's still that Reefer Madness mentality. So.
Is the SBI, the people you talk to, that they talk to the sheriffs, how do we create a real education to touch every department in 100 counties in North Carolina? Is there already an effort to do that? If not, how do we do that? How do we find funds to that with the association? And how do you touch the biggest people against us? How do we start that education through a real effort? And is that already happening? And how do we get involved?
Well, the SBI said the only way they will approve a field test if it's from the short list of the DEA. And then every law enforcement branch will take that approved list from the SBI, and we will probably have to be charged with raising some of those funds to get those mobile field tests in the hands of law enforcement. It's frustrating, guys, because when the DEA put out their federal business opportunity, like a request for proposal, that closed on March the 15th. And here we are on July the 3rd. And we still cannot get this from the DEA. And we want to do the right thing. We want to follow the law. And if the SBI says, well, Blake, whatever the DEA thinks, that's what we'll recommend. Well, then let's get going. With all the technology in this world, you're telling me we cannot approve a test that can measure 0.3% THC or less? Really? To me, that's absurd. But we're going to have to work that process. But just to let you know, Brooke, just the SBI memo, again, caused a ripple effect, a domino effect, and gave every level of law enforcement the chance to bitch. And we have to respect those concerns.
North Carolina State University Extension Office, right? They orchestrated in conjunction with the Hemp Commission a series in every region around the state of law enforcement, essentially continuing education on this exact thing. Last year in July, actually this time last year, I think it was like July, literally, we took a batch of brownies and we literally, we sponsored.
Is this the right story?
It was not just brownies. And we sponsored, as Carolina Hemp Company, the effort to do that in this region out at the Waynesville Extension Office, right? So we had a room full of about 70 law enforcement officers from around the region, okay? So your specific question, what is being done and can we do more of it, right? There's already things that have been done and we absolutely need to really push that to the front of the pack, because the responses that I got in large from the law enforcement officers that were on site that day were more along the lines of, and we talked about the flower, right? It was not a surprise to them a year ago. We talked about it. Their thing was, for the most of them, was based around rights. Are we infringing on somebody's rights? Are we having ours as police officers violated? You know, which is an argument for a different day, right? And there was a couple of folks in there that were staunchly against the concept altogether, you know, as you can imagine. But not many. One, as a matter of fact, was the only one. He was a state trooper that's based out of deeper down in western North Carolina. Can't remember his name. He was staunchly against it. Everybody else had legitimate questions, legitimate concerns, and they were engaged. And that's the key here. Now, these are not the top brass that I'm talking about. These are the guys that were sent by the top brass to get some information about this phenomena that's taking place in North Carolina, western North Carolina. So we need more of that, and that's the olive branch that we're extending to law enforcement, the Department of Agriculture as an industry. Is that, hey, we want to work with you. We can be incredibly helpful, right? You got to work with us too. So, you know, what's happening in Raleigh with the law enforcement? You know, this is largely upper brass kind of people that we're talking about, not the guys on the streets.
Is this being influenced by any private lobby that we are against us? Is there money being played by private industry against this anywhere? Does anybody identify any of that?
I personally have not. I could speculate all day long and like,
well,
I have not.
Somebody knows who's playing money where.
Yeah, exactly. I personally have not. I do not know. I wouldn't be surprised, but at the same time, in this state, with the momentum that the industry has, I think we've got a really, really strong, you know, private lobby of our own.
What I said before is just educating our legislators that the smokable flower market is being fueled by a lot of our indoor growers and greenhouse growers. Since we're just planting right now for a September or early October harvest, you know, they had to understand really how we had developed this market. And it doesn't have a blueprint. It's been very organic for those that are fine-tuning their craft. But the investments that have been made are significant because it's like any other industry. If you don't offer a regulatory framework, you do the best job possible to follow the guidelines and the law that's out there. And in this case, that's the federal farm bill. And what it says, if it's 0.3% THC or less, whether it's a plant part, a leaf, flower, or any other product from it, it's compliant. It's an agricultural commodity. So it's disappointing to see our state try to move to bring about another sense of understanding that we think it's a drug again, after it's already been declared as such. But remember, what we have to fight for is exactly where our collective voice is that we are writing the blueprint for the industry, and we need to be at the table, because any regulatory framework needs to be advantageous to everyone at the supply chain, or we won't be able to compete. It's fun to talk about how North Carolina is going to be the gold standard, but if we don't do it, we're not going to be the bronze standard. Period.
They issued the permit to grow hemp for the sale and marketing of hemp.
And Brooke Brooke brings up a good point. This is going to happen, folks. All right, I've already got the emails. If this goes any further, you can be assured there's going to be multiple companies that are going to sue the Department of Agriculture and the North Carolina Hemp Commission because they've been approved for 3 years to grow for this purpose, and no one told them they couldn't. And that's the most important thing to note, even when you email our legislators, is the right hand is not talking to the left hand with our program. No one told them they couldn't. And as I argued with those legislators on Friday, we approved another 100 farmers, 85 of them were approved to grow for CBD smokable flower. No one called them and said, by the way, They're getting ready to ban it. So you don't have 5 months, you actually have 4 months now to go ahead and get out what you already planned to sustain from. So that doesn't make any sense. And on principle, communicating with our legislators, this is what it boils down to. It's not fair, and like Franny said, how in the world can any farmer sleep at night when they've been granted the opportunity to plant a new seed, and it's based on trust, but at the same time, we're casting doubt every single day that what you're doing could be wrong. That, to me, is not where we need to go agriculturally. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you know, that's as valid of a point as anything else, from the farm to the processors, to the retailers, to the distributors, is also the consumers, the people that are actually receiving the actual benefit that we're all trying to give to them and provide access to them. At Carolina Hemp Company, I know I've talked with Mike, I know Franny and Jeff, they have bound to be experiencing the same. We get a lot of good, solid testimonials that flow in through our channels that we've already, condensed the information and are prepared to deliver it not only in paper, but through email campaigns to the respective committees about what the result of all this is. The unified message is to pull these provisions from the bill now. The cart is way ahead of the horse, way ahead, considering again the 30,000-foot view of, well, there's this that's got to happen. The FDA or USDA is going to make, commentary on the thing. It doesn't make sense to even have this bill in committee right now.
I think the first thing we need to do, Brooke, is communicate to the judiciary members on this list and reach out to them and tell our story again. There's two sides of the Senate, which are already convinced, we've already convinced of our story. Now we need to convince the House. And the reason to do that is that if we form relationships with these folks now, it's going to be better for us in the future. And I am all about activism, and as many of you know, that's how I started in this industry. But I do think we have an opportunity to be a little bit different. And I've gotten calls from other states when they saw our compromise that were so surprised that we were going to be allowed to sit down and work it out. It just is unheard of in the industry. And for whatever it's worth, the standards and the protocols we put in place on the hemp side can be applied on every side. So that's important. So we'll take like one more question and we'll get back to, yes, Mike.
Real quick, there is a couple events being planned. I believe the first one's July 30th. There's a hemp educational piece that we got the permit to be in Raleigh on the Capitol lawn there to have a hemp event. That's July 30th, it's a Tuesday. When you talk about your messages or whatever, if you can or can't be there, when these events come up, we can carpool, we can rent buses, we can put funds to it to get people there. If you can't be there and you do have a story and you do have a message, writing us an email or taking your cell phone and a quick video, we'll make sure it gets to the right people. But there are a lot of events coming up that you all can get involved in. Maybe we can all link together through social media, Facebook, the Hemp Retailers Association. Carolina Hemp Growers is a great one. North Carolina Industrial Hemp Committee. But let's all unite through Facebook. I'm Michael Sims on there. The other people in this room are on social media too. Let's unite. Let's get the message. Whoever can show up, show up. If you can't show up, send $1, send a message, send us a video. Anything helps. Every little bit helps. We'll find a place for it and a piece for it. We got a raffle now.